Welcome to the Superhero Bibliophiles podcast. This is a companion show to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast, and I'm your host, Perry Constantine. And joining me today to discuss Joss Whedon and John Cassaday's run on the Astonishing X-Men title is Justin Zyduck. Justin, how you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Had a great time having you on the main show. We talked about the 1977 Spider-Man series, and I'm looking forward to diving into to this. But before we jump too much into that, what kind of stuff is grabbing your attention lately?
Well, actually, relevant to today's discussion, I'm still on the Buffy rewatch with my wife. We're actually just getting into season 6 now, and these are episodes that she hasn't seen. So it's interesting to see a brand new reaction to season 6, given how controversial that was
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Also, reading a lot of Hellboy for for the podcast that I do. So
Yeah,
that's a good time.
let's remind people about your show because it is a great listen. So why don't you tell people about your show again?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Justin from the Iron Age of Comics. It's a critical reevaluation of comic books from 1985 to 2000, which means that we try to make the case that this 15-year span has its own identity, and like the way that we talk about the Golden and Silver and Bronze Age, it's not just like the modern age for 40 years or whatever. So we talk about everything from Watchmen and Dark Knight and the Ghost World and Bone, sort of the pillars of the age, to like Wildcats and Deadpool and Secret Wars 2, right? And everywhere in between.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great show. I really enjoy listening to it, and you guys have some very interesting opinions, and you do a great job of laying them out. So even when I don't, agree with what you guys are saying, I can always be like, well, I can kind of see where their approach is coming from with that. And it is especially, and I mentioned last time we had you on the main show, it's especially interesting for me since I grew up in that era. So that's the era when I became a comic book fan. So going back to it and listening to the opinions of people who started off just before I did and how they approached it, is a very interesting intellectual exercise.
I'm glad to hear that.
But anyway, so and for my part, I have not had a whole lot of time to get into much, but we did have the 50th, I think, yeah, 50th anniversary of Jaws recently. We're recording this
Oh yeah.
in end of June right now, but by the time you guys listen to it, it'll be much later than that. And it happened at the very interesting time because in one of my English classes, I use English movies to help introduce my students to the grammar and to get them a little bit more to show them how grammar works in the English movies, and it gets them a little bit more interested. They pay a little bit more attention because they know we're going to be watching part of a movie in class.
Mhm.
And the movie that we just finished watching, literally the day before the 50th anniversary, was Jaws. So it was really nice to get back into that, and still holds up. I'm
Oh yeah.
always amazed at how well that movie holds up, even all these years later.
Yeah, it's a magic trick. People will talk about, oh, Spielberg, he's a master of pacing and, mise en scène and all these other things and stuff. And I just can't put together what is the magic that makes Jaws. It is like one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, but like it's still a movie about like a shark and stuff. So it's not something that I would like intrinsically gravitate towards necessarily. It's just really impressive how good it is for, you know, it, it is cinema, right?
Yeah, it's one of those movies, and Back to the Future, which I also showed in this class too. And I
Mhm.
realized rewatching them both, these are two movies that every time, I haven't seen them in a while, I'm just like, oh yeah, they're okay. But then when I go back and I
Mhm.
rewatch them, I'm like, oh my God, these movies really are amazing.
Right.
So that's mostly what I've been into lately. Although
Mhm.
I managed to watch the first episode of Ironheart last night, which was really good. I really dug it. I'm looking forward to checking out. At this time, they have the first 3 episodes up, so looking forward to checking out the other two. But
Mhm.
I really liked it. I thought that she was kind of wasted in Wakanda Forever, and she felt kind of tacked on there. Even though I really did like Dominique Thorne's performance, and so I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying seeing her, get to spread her wings a little bit more in it. I'm not sure if you've watched it at all yet.
Cool. No, I'm so checked out of the MCU TV shows. I at some point I realized that I couldn't keep up and I just abandoned the whole project.
That's basically how my wife took it too. Like I got her into the
Mhm,
MCU and the movies, but when it came to the TV shows, I think she watched WandaVision, and I think she watched
mhm.
like maybe one or two episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier, and that was like all I could get her to watch. After that, she's like, "No, I'll just watch the movies."
Yeah, my brother Zach is a huge Daredevil fan, and so he, swears by that, and he's like, "Justin, you gotta watch it." I'm like, I have old Star Trek episodes to watch, so I'm lot of demands on my time here, right? But
That's the problem. There is just so much content out there that it's impossible to absorb all of it. I remember back,
Mhm.
when I was younger, because there wasn't as much of it, so I would just consume everything that was even tangentially related to superheroes or comic books in any way. And now it's just like I still haven't seen like the last season of Supergirl, and I really don't care to. I've only seen like two episodes of Batwoman, and I don't really care to see the rest. So now I'm getting a lot more selective now that we're spoiled for choice.
Yeah, exactly. It's astonishing to me, as someone who grew up in like the late '80s and early '90s and stuff, like thinking about how desperately, like I said with the Spider-Man episode, like I watched those Spider-Man episodes just because there was nothing else for me
Hmm.
if I wanted live action, and now there's so much stuff that I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll skip this next one, right? Maybe
Yeah.
I'll a Daredevil show when I was a kid. If you had told me about that, it would be inconceivable to me that I would not be watching that every week, over and over
I
again.
I will say though, I will agree with him. Daredevil is an amazing show. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
will
I'm
co-sign
I'm
that it's
sure
fun
it
to
is actually.
watch. But anyway, like we said, we are talking about Josh Whedon and John Cassaday's run on Astonishing X-Men. This followed the Grant Morrison era and kind of served as sort of a continuation, sort of a reboot of the X-Men concept after Morrison. Um, Obviously we had some stuff carry over, but it was really kind of a back to basics type of thing. And this
Mhm,
spanned I think it was a total of about 24 issues. Well, 25 counting the giant size, or 26 I think counting the giant size issues. I think those are two. I have them in the trade format, so looking at the four trades, I have the four individual trades. That's gifted, dangerous, torn, and unstoppable are the four trades
mhm.
here. So let's you mentioned you're doing this Buffy rewatch. So what is your history with Whedon and Cassaday as creators?
Um, yeah, I didn't actually get into Buffy until I think it was the last season, or maybe it was off the air. I was in, I remember it was in college, and I just started watching it, like, it was on FX, like, twice a day, and so that sort of became, like, my soap opera, for when I didn't have class. So, yeah, I really got into that there. I was, like, right in the right spot. For a couple of years later for this comic to come out. I was really looking forward to it because I was big into the Grant Morrison comic, the new X-Men run, and I thought, well, what are they going to do after this that could possibly not be, seen as a step down from Grant Morrison? And when they said Joss Whedon, I'm like, oh, intriguing. But yeah, I'm not like a diehard, or wasn't a diehard Whedon fan necessarily. I mean, it's sort of hit and miss. I'd never really got into Firefly. I did like Doctor Horrible. I have that Much Ado About Nothing movie that he made on DVD. So, yeah, I'm a person who likes uh, his work. Let's say, yeah, and John Cassaday. I got into him via, I think it's a pretty obscure these days, but there was like a Union Jack miniseries that he did.
Oh yes, I
Um,
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I got into that, and then I made the jump to Planetary, and I'm a huge fan of his there. Really shocking, that when he passed away, yeah, really took us by surprise because we had had a Planetary episode lined up to do, and then it was like that week it happened, so it was very surreal.
Yeah, I remember listening to that planetary episode, and you had to go back and record a disclaimer to post at the beginning of it about his
It's
passing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
truly
for
strange.
me, I got into Buffy when I was in during the first season. Actually, it was like halfway into the first season.
Hmm.
Um, because I had seen the original. Buffy on, VHS, and the movie with Christy Swanson, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is terrible. Even as a kid, I knew it was it was bad.
Yeah.
And then when I heard they were doing a TV show, and I saw like the ads for it on, back then, what was the WB?
Mhm.
I'm just like, why would they make a TV show out of that movie? That movie was so bad, and so I
Yeah,
just
exactly.
avoided it. And then I just happened to randomly be like flipping channels one day, and for some reason I stopped on Buffy when it was
Mhm.
playing an episode, and I watched it. I'm like, oh my god, this is really good. And after that, I started watching the series, and then I caught up on the reruns when they were on the off season. And from then on, I was a fan of it. I followed it to Angel. To this day, I still maintain that Angel was the superior show. Um, I missed the boat on Firefly when it came out, but I ended up watching it years later on DVD and fell in love with that too. So yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely would have called myself a Whedon fan. I was also excited about this run. I loved what he did with the Avengers movies too. I couldn't get into Doctor Horrible, just like I'm not a musical guy, so it just didn't do anything for me.
Sure.
Um, but but most of his others, and I didn't see the whatever that show was he did on Max before right before all the stuff about him came out.
Yeah.
And I tried watching Dollhouse, but that didn't really grab me either. But
Yeah, same.
his comic book work, I really dug it. Especially, I dug the Buffy continuation comics that he was co-writing. I don't think he was the main writer on them. And I really
Mhm.
dug this at the time, although I didn't like it as much as I had expected to like it when it came out. Um, and so that was kind of like how I approached it. For Cassaday, I got introduced to him through his run on Captain America, the New Deal stuff he did with John A. Reber.
Mhm.
And it's funny to see like how influential his style was, because he was the first person who really kind of detailed all the chainmail on Cap's costume, and then that
Right.
became like the standard for like a good decade or more after that, is to do the hyper detailed on the
Yeah.
chainmail. But then later, I read Planetary, and fell in love with his work there. I also seems to have a habit of getting working with these writers who later turn out to be problematic, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But what were your feelings on the Astonishing X-Men run, kind of overall?
Overall, like I said, I was excited for it. I enjoyed it as it was coming out. It is one of those things where I started picking it up in single issues. I actually have an issue one that was signed by Joss Whedon, which used to be a cooler thing to have than it
Yeah.
than it possibly is today. Um, yeah, I picked up the first 6 issues in individuals, and then after that, the delays were such that I decided to actually, I was the actual waiting for trade reader on that. But yeah, I like it. I think it's interesting. It is sort of a mixed bag, I would say. I probably like it less now than I used to, and that's probably part of that is because of all the baggage that comes with it.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's a lot of ideas that I like. I find when I reread it, I found that I liked individual moments a whole lot, but the run as a whole, maybe I didn't think held up as well as I remembered.
Yeah, I felt largely the same going back to it. Um, I love the Morrison run even to this day. It's one of my favorite comic runs of all time, and
Yeah,
so and it still holds up. I did a whole podcast series about covering the entire Morrison run. It ran for like about 30 some episodes. So
yeah.
obviously I still love that thing a lot, but this one, it didn't grab me as much at the time. I mean, it was just all I was also reading in trades by this point, so and it was getting praise all over the place. So maybe it was just the combination of all the praise it was getting, and just like the expectation setting by Morrison, that it didn't grab me as much as it grabbed other people. I enjoyed it. I
Mhm.
enjoyed rereading it too. But I agree with you. I think I like individual moments, or I like, the character interactions more than the actual stories. I think as far as the stories overall go, it's not that impressive, and the villains also don't really do a whole lot for me in this entire run.
Yeah, I have to say that I am allergic to the break world. Like the the entire concept, all the stuff going on there. I found it hard to get engaged. That seemed like some other kind of thing that was sort of being stapled on, when I guess that isn't the tradition of X-Men, right? Because like, Chris Claremont was bringing all sorts of diverse outside influences into X-Men and stuff, but just like whatever this break world thing is and whatever story Joss Whedon wanted to tell with it, I was like, I would rather be doing anything else in the X-Men world than this particular alien race or whatever.
Yeah, the break world stuff. I mean, I'm so as much as I love the X-Men, and I do, I'm not a fan when they go into space. Like it just I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that detracts from the central concept of the team, which is this idea of, it's hard to, enjoy a book about fighting for a world that hates and fears you when you're constantly running off to other planets. So I never really liked
Right.
the idea of the Shi'ar type stuff, the break world. The Brood is a different story. Like I really like the Brood stories, but for the most part, I'm not a fan whenever the X-Men go out into space.
Yeah, yeah. I have that same just weird feeling about like, especially considering that Dark Phoenix saga is always held up as this is the epitome of the X-Men. This is the one X-Men story that you have to read, and it has almost nothing to do with like the mutant metaphor or whatever. It's mostly like a bunch of space stuff happens, and then some stuff from the old Avengers TV show happens, and all that.
Yeah, I know you've talked about on your show Days of Future Past being I think you said it was your favorite X-Men story, and I feel like that is a much better representation of what the X-Men concept is. For me, it's always been God Loves Man Kills. I think that is definitely the quintessential X-Men story to really kind of get the metaphor aspect of the book.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
But one of the other things that really kind of bugged me about this at the time, now I don't mind it so much, but at the time, Marvel had this whole policy, and this is kind of a stupid thing to get hung up on in retrospect, but at the time, Marvel had this whole dead is dead policy where when we
Right.
kill someone off, they're going to stay dead. I'm like, okay, cool. I can get behind that. And then at this time, and then they brought back Colossus, they brought back Magneto, they turned retroactively turned Zorn into a actual character instead of an identity that Magneto had created. Um, and I think there's some other ones too that had died and come back around this time. And at the time, Joe Quesada, he kind of justified it. So he's like, no, 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 it was never dead is dead policy. It's if you have a good enough story idea, then we'll allow it. And I'm like, come on. I mean, the
Right.
the whole Magneto, Magneto was never dead at all. It was just all this, ruse. He was hiding out in Genosha the whole time. That was not a good resurrection story. So miss me with
No.
that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that whole the Joe Quesada and like the Bill Jamis era, like them running Marvel, was such a weird bubble, in Marvel history. It's it had some of the I think best runs of all time came out of that, and like a lot of also just really terrible things came out of that, and a lot in the middle. So it was a very interesting time, and I sort of feel like that period sort of breaks the Marvel universe in a way. Like we used, like sort of the conceit all along was that like everything from Fantastic Four #1 to today is all like it all counts, right? It's all part of a tapestry or whatever you want to call it. And then after, and like by design, and I think it was the right move for the time. Jameis and Quesada were like, well, we can't be hung up on continuity. This is getting confusing. So they made sort of like a clean break, and like in the later chapters of New X-Men, when Magneto takes over New York, right? It should be like all the superheroes are involved, but there's some kind of passing, throwaway reference to like, oh yeah, we kicked the other superheroes out of town before we took over or whatever. So yeah, that was a very strange. And then like it went. This is sort of like this comic is actually sort of X-Men returning to let's be superheroes and let's do the Marvel Universe thing and let's have other characters show up and stuff. So this is really sort of a turning point in that story.
Yeah, and especially because you had this was also this weird period when they decided Wolverine was going to be on the member every single X-Men team, and then he was also going to be on the Avengers at this point too, and
Mhm.
and so it's just like the continuity stuff was very strange, especially when you're reading this run. I think it kind of this run it's very weird because other than the giant size issues, which is when they bring in other superheroes from around the Marvel universe,
Yeah.
and it I think you could almost say that this these 4 books, this run is in its own separate pocket universe or something, because it is so disconnected from what else is
Yeah.
happening in all the other books.
Mhm. And that's sort of interesting because I feel like the intent in bringing Joss Whedon aboard was to do this thing of like, hey, this is a totally accessible, like if you've never read the X-Men before, but you like the movies, here's, a guy who is known for TV and movies doing the X-Men thing. You can climb aboard. This will be a good entry point. But then in practice, there's actually just tons and tons of continuity references in this book, like stuff that Morrison did, stuff that Claremont did, all sort of rearranged, and some of the things don't seem to line up or whatever. But um, yeah, I wonder what Marvel was like. I wonder what their reaction was to getting these scripts and being like, oh, this follows on pretty directly in places from Morrison and pretty not in place not directly from Morrison.
I feel like at this time there's a like with the dead is dead policy. I feel like there's a big disconnect between what Marvel was saying publicly and what their actual intentions were behind the scenes. I figured like their whole
Hmm.
thing was just, we just want Josh Whedon to write this book because he's
Right.
gonna he's gonna get high sales, and we don't really care if he wants to make it as continuity dense as possible. We're gonna let him do that, and especially because the other books, you had Chuck Austin continuing on Uncanny X-Men, you on the adjective list title, and then Claremont came back to Uncanny X-Men, and those were stuff that were very steep in their previous work too. So
Hmm.
all this stuff was, but and especially when they get like in the Gifted arc when invades the mansion and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, I'm like, aren't there supposed to be like 20 other X-Men around here? Where are all of them right now?
Right. Yeah. Iceman nowhere to be seen in the
Yeah,
throughout the
no,
throughout this run.
no, I except for the giant size issues, and then he pops up
Right.
there. But one of the things I found interesting going back and rereading it, and this goes to the character stuff we were mentioning before, is and I know people often criticize Whedon for his, the kind of like snarky dialogue that he does in a lot
Hmm.
of his stuff. Um, but going back and rereading this run, I was kind of surprised at how kind of maybe self-censoring he was on that, because it doesn't feel as snarky as like you'd see in his movie and his TV work. I'm not sure if you picked up on any of that yourself.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a lot of Whedonisms in it, and I was trying to get the person who got me into Buffy. I was trying to get her into reading this when it came out, and I said, oh, if you think about it, like Kitty is sort of like Willow and Buffy, and Beast is sort of like Giles, and I was trying to make like connections there or whatever. But yeah, I do think that it's a little, and I'm sure that Whedon felt some sort of pressure to be like restraint, like these are not my toys, right, to play with. So yeah, I think that's accurate.
I feel like too, and this is just my own little theory on this, because when you're doing it with a TV show or a movie, the actors are interpreting those lines, right? So
Yes.
so you can feel a little bit more let off the leash, because if you go too far, the actors might be like, I don't think my character would really say this, or they might do some self-editing themselves. A lot of it depends on how the line is delivered. Whereas if you're doing it in a comic book, it's just those words on a page. And I wonder if
Mhm.
maybe Whedon got a little bit self-conscious about himself, and he started, either consciously or unconsciously self-editing himself because of that. Because it's not as dramatic as like say Bendis, where Bendis just goes all out with the nonstop dialogue.
Right. Yeah, I think that to your point about he usually writes things that are for actors to say. I sometimes wonder if the break world stuff would be more compelling if you had actors saying it and like bringing a little something to it, because like in that last arc, right, where it's a lot of like palace intrigue and like who is betraying who and who's on what side or whatever, it's a lot of semi-identical aliens sort of like backstabbing each other, and sort of hard to like track, who's doing what or whatever. I feel like if those were actors, like good actors, they would bring stuff to the roles and they would be memorable, and some of those lines might not even be interesting. When it is just words on the page, it's just sort of like a lot of pontificating, and like it's sort of standard like comic book alien dialogue about like silence, Outlander. We have that kind of thing.
Yeah, I had the same idea when we got to the Unstoppable arc. I'm just like, all these aliens, they look almost exactly the same. I
Mhm.
really don't understand. I mean, at least, what's her name? Can't remember how to pronounce her name, but Kagane or whatever it is.
Right.
But comparing like Krun and Ord, it just like I cannot tell these two guys apart. They look the same, they sound the same. I mean, I don't even understand why we had to have these two different characters. We could have just
Right.
probably combined them into one.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the break world stuff I think is the weakest part, which is unfortunate that it's like at the end, right? Which is supposed to be the big finale or whatever. But
Yeah, I think surprisingly, I think the high points for this, because it's these four arcs: Gifted, Dangerous, Torn, and Unstoppable. I
mhm.
think Gifted and Torn are probably my favorites of the run. I think those are kind of the most interesting. Gifted, not so
Yeah.
much the plot wise, but just like the character dynamics, I think are really good.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas in Dangerous and Unstoppable, there's good character stuff in them. I feel like the stories in those, the plot centric stuff in them, it kind of brings them down a little bit. Like I
Mhm.
still don't understand how the whole danger thing all worked out. It just doesn't make any sense. Talking about continuity or breaking continuity, this just feels like completely out of left field.
Yeah, and it adds to the canon of Professor Xavier as this, sort of Machiavellian monster manipulator guy who will do, whatever is necessary, right, for whatever he thinks is right. And the X-Men sort of tell him off, right, in this in
Mhm.
that storyline about like, oh, you think you can dish it out to somebody else, right? But like Agent Brand, who's who's introduced in this run, she's also a very very much like, by whatever means necessary, whatever's needed to do to get the job done. And I feel like Whedon wants us to kind of like her, which is weird because they are both sort of the same. I will sacrifice anybody and anything to get to my goal. But Professor Xavier is the authority figure jerk, and Agent Brand is, hey, maybe she'll hook up with the Beast, right? And that's we want to see that, I guess.
Which also comes out of nowhere, kind of.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
was really kind of disappointed in Whedon because he's usually much better at, building up relationships. And maybe it's just the fact that they didn't have, like you said, with the Break World stuff, they didn't have actors playing these parts. So we weren't
Mhm.
able to feel that build up as much. But even still, like up until Unstoppable, they don't really have a whole lot of interaction to establish why she'd be attracted to him.
Right. And he has really no he has even less reason to be attracted to her because of how awful she's been throughout this entire arc. It's sort of been like, "Oh, you like me? Well, I can overlook that because I'm a cat man now."
Hmm. Yeah. And so let's take a quick break and then we'll dive into some more of this stuff.
Blast off into a new universe with Corsairs, a new sci-fi space opera serial by me, Percival Constantine. In these adventures, join the crew of the Corsair, a group of intergalactic mercenaries, as they struggle to survive in the depths of corporate-controlled space. If you're a fan of Firefly, Cowboy Bebop, or Guardians of the Galaxy, then you're going to love Corsairs. Subscribers to my Patreon get 2 new episodes a week, while free members get 1 new episode a week starting in December. Patreon offers new subscribers a 7-day free trial, but I'm also throwing in another perk. If you sign up with the coupon code SCP, you'll get 90% off your first month. So visit patreon.com/Percival Constantine and join in the adventures. We all love superhero movies and TV shows, but what about the comics that inspired them? Marvel, DC, Image, and more have provided the template for the movies and shows we all enjoy watching, and it's important to honor that tradition by buying and reading comic books. Superhero Cinephiles is proud to be an affiliate of mycomicshop.com. It began as a small mail-order business operated by junior high school student Buddy Saunders all the way back in 1960 and has been operating on the internet since 1997. My Comic Shop has new releases, value packs, back issues, trade paperbacks, comic art, regular auctions, and a whole lot more, including 35% discounts on pre-orders. You can also sell your own comics or utilize their consignment services. You can even create your own want list of comics you're searching for. To get started, check out our affiliate link in the show notes or on the superherocinephiles.com homepage.
So let's kind of dive into the characters we have here. So the basic cast, it's more or less the new X-Men cast, right? So we have Wolverine, Cyclops, Emma, Beast. Jean's obviously no longer here because she died at the end of Morrison's run.
Mm.
But instead we bring in Kitty. She comes back to the team with this, and then obviously we get the resurrection of Colossus partway through in the first arc.
Mm.
What do you feel about this choice of characters for this run?
Yeah, I mean it's a little I guess it's a little safe, right? Especially having Kitty in there. I know that that is a character who Whedon really, responded to and who has informed his subsequent characters, in TV and stuff. Um, I mean, I enjoy this cast, right? I think maybe it's good that Whedon didn't go outside of his comfort zone and try to. I don't know if he'd done Nightcrawler or whatever. Would he like learn a bunch of German words and just sort of like throw them in there to show how much research he did, right? Or would he do something like embarrassing with like a minority character or something? Who can say? Maybe it was maybe these were safe choices for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We did see that in the again in that in those giant size issues. We did see him using a lot of German for Nightcrawler.
Right. Right.
Um, but yeah, I thought it was a good. I thought the cast worked pretty well. Kitty was a great addition to this group. I
Mhm.
thought he had I had never known about his affection for Kitty, although looking back now on Willow and Buffy, you could definitely see some of that DNA in there. And so I thought he had a really good voice for Kitty, although,
Mhm.
talking about the kind of dialogue and the Whedonisms, this whole, I've got cloud hair thing was a little bit kind of like,
Right.
come on, it's this isn't really
Yeah.
working here. Um, but mostly the cast works really well. I really liked the interactions between Emma and Kitty. I thought those were the ones that he had the best handle on of all of them.
Yeah, I thought so too. I really like the idea of them being sort of antagonistic, but like Emma sort of seeing that as a virtue, as somebody to keep her in line. I had never read a lot of like the Generation X comics from the '90s or whatever. I have been informed by people I have talked to that actually Kitty and Emma seem to have like buried the hatchet at some point in those runs or something, which I just don't know about that, right? But
See, I had read Generation X, at least the Lobdell stuff. I don't
mhm,
remember much stuff with Kitty in there.
mhm.
So I'm not sure. As far as I personally thought this was the first time that they had really interacted in
That's
years.
what I had assumed too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if I know that, Lobdell didn't write all of Generation X. After he left, you had Larry Hama came on, and I never read Hama's stuff, so I'm not sure if Kitty came through there at all. That's very possible, um but yeah, I thought their interactions were great. I really liked the way he wrote Wolverine too.
Mhm.
It's just kind of like he gave you he gave just he's not the best Wolverine writer, but I think he knows that, so he gives you just enough of the character without going pushing too much.
Yeah, I think there was a definite restraint in I mean, because everybody wants to do their crack at Wolverine, right? So I think that Joss Whedon actually sort of wanted to spread that around or whatever, and just sort of use Wolverine as the secret sauce, right? It's like whenever you need
Mhm.
a good punchline for a scene, Wolverine is there.
Yeah, yeah. And some of the dialogue here, like when Emma says to Scott, Kitty thinks I'm controlling your thoughts, and he's just like, "You're not, are you?" And and she's like, "You'll never see me naked again."
Yeah, again, that's one of those like individual scenes that like I will remember forever, right?
Mhm.
That's really just burned in my brain. I love that scene. I really like his Cyclops in here because I think Cyclops is a character who is hard to do, right? Because some people want, I mean, Morrison really leaned into like Cyclops the sad sack, right?
Mhm.
He is a huge mess. Whedon does that, but also allows him to like be the leader. Like he is Cyclops is a strong leader in this one. He's capable of just taking that sort of decisive action that sometimes he wasn't able to in New X-Men.
Yeah, what I like when I went back to Morrison's run and I did that podcast, one of the things that stood out to me was Assault on Weapon Plus, which it
Mhm.
was just Cyclops, Wolverine, and Phantom X. And what really
Yeah.
impressed me in that was how I really in that arc I really kind of understood what Morrison was going with Cyclops, because he kind of he took the character after he'd gone through this whole possession by Apocalypse thing. It's a whole thing, guys. Comics.
Yeah. Yes.
And he came back and he was just, completely, and it wasn't like a typical Morrison didn't approach it like a typical supervillain possession where it's like, oh, I was, controlled by this evil spirit, but now I'm fine. Everything's back to normal. It was this whole thing where he says in one of the issues, like, Apocalypse spent a lot of time breaking me down psychologically when he was controlling my body.
Mhm.
And so now that he comes back, he is completely broken. And so he has to kind of build himself back up. But and like one of my favorite lines is there is when they're having this, him and Emma are having this psychic affair, and she says to him, "You don't have to be such a bloody superhero all the time." And he just whispers like, "But I've never been allowed to be anything else." And I thought, I'm like,
Right.
oh, I get it now. I see what he's doing here. It's this, and then we see the dichotomy in Assault on Weapon Plus, when at the beginning he's at the Hellfire Club and he's drinking himself silly and he's just like this total, sad sack, woe is me, everything sucks. But then he goes from that to being kidnapped and taken on this mission with Weapon Plus, and then boom, he shifts on a dime into action mode. And that's when I
Yeah.
really kind of grabbed him, like, okay, the Morrison's whole thesis here for Cyclops is, here's a guy who has no idea how to be a normal human being. But when it comes
Right.
to
Yeah.
the action stuff, when it comes to the mutant superhero stuff, he's on point. He can handle all that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
then I think Whedon kind of leaned into it, and I think this Morrison started it, and then Whedon took the ball and ran with it, and then I think Fraction pushed it over the line. This whole idea of like, we are going to remake Cyclops from being this, who had gotten this reputation partly from the comics of the 90s, although I think that's a little bit I think there's some moments in the 90s too, like there's an issue when him and the acolytes are stranded in Australia, and he
Mhm.
has to like lead them to civilization, lead them back to civilization. He's amazing in that.
Right.
But the animated series just portrayed him as, Xavier's lapdog. And
Right.
I mean, I've been rewatching it. My daughter is starting to get into it now, so I've been rewatching the '90s series, and we got to the Morlock episode, and he's on this date with Jean, and at the beginning of the date, he's like all distracted, and she's trying to talk to him. She's like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Being an X-Man is the most important job in the world to me." And I'm just like, "Dude, come the fuck on!" No wonder I thought you were such a weenie when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean, like Cyclops in the '90s is definitely a weenie because I mean, this is what I always tell people who aren't familiar with like the older comics or whatever, is that like originally Cyclops is the main character, and then the Wolverine is like the foil that sort of like gets gums up his gears or whatever. And then by the '90s, like Wolverine is so popular that it's like Wolverine is the hero, and Cyclops is the stick in the mud who's like getting in the way of him doing even more awesome stuff
Hmm.
that he would do if he was off the chain, right?
And one of the things
But
I
yeah,
liked about,
I think.
oh, sorry,
Sorry.
finish your thought.
I was gonna say that what I think that Whedon picks up on here, to that like I've never been allowed to be anything else. I really like that idea, that that revelation, that's the whole reason that um Xavier made Scott the leader is because like, well, this kid won't have anything else in his life. Like he needs this to give him something to organize himself behind it. Like maybe that's true or maybe that's not true, but I think that's a really interesting way of looking at this character, and that sort of, even though I don't think, like, it's hard for me to like read this arc and like read like a Claremont comic or what, and believe that these are all the same characters exactly. But that definitely sort of tracks as a through line throughout this character, no matter who's been writing him.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I one of the things I liked about the that Cyclops Wolverine dynamic that I thought Morrison did a good job establishing in that Weapon Plus arc is this idea that it's not so much, Wolverine's just trying to be an antagonizing force and everything. It's this idea that they both actually do have a respect for each other. It's just like they just have
Yeah,
very different ways of approaching it. And I thought Whedon does a little bit of that here, but I don't think it never quite hits the same notes that it did under Morrison.
yeah. There's that that one thing where he, Cyclops like vaporizes that Sentinel with one giant blast, and he goes like, once in a while I'm reminded of why you were the leader of this outfit. But
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I know what you're talking about with like in that Assault and Weapon Plus, like the whole thing of getting Cyclops drunk is like, I want him on my mission because there's nobody who I trust more than Scott Summers.
Yeah. Now Beast here, I'm not a big fan of Beast in this run. I feel like I don't. First off, I think it was kind of a mistake to stick with the cat form as long as they did, because I don't think anyone could quite draw it the way Quitely did.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I love Cassaday's art, I don't really like his rendition of Beast here. It just feels like he's always soaking wet.
Right. Yeah, he looks because yeah, Quietly looks like a blue lion, and this looks like a house cat who
Mm-hmm.
is who needs a tidy up. Yeah, and I think that the Cassaday's like weird suit that he makes for Beast, where it's sort of like this. It's not quite overalls, but it's like these weird pants things. I thought that was. I
Yeah,
just don't think that worked.
yeah. Every time it never struck me before I've read this, and I've read this arc like at least 2 or 3 times before, but it never jumped out at me. But this time, it was really jumping out to me. And I'm just like, that's just such a weird design, and it's like
Yeah,
it's
I
like
don't know
not.
how you arrive at that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess he just wanted to make the X as prominent as possible, but it while still showing off as much of beast form as he could. But yeah, it doesn't ring true.
Mhm.
Also, it looks like they got rid of the hooves he had in that Quitely gave him too, because he just now got
Yeah.
regular cat feet instead.
Yeah.
Um, Overall, what do you think of the costume redesigns?
Um, I mean, I really liked the Frank Quitely, like the X-Men jackets. I love that. Fell in love with that the instant I saw it. If they made commercially available X-Men jackets, I would wear one.
Oh God, hell
at
yes.
great expense, I'm sure. But yeah. I mean, I don't think that's Yeah, I'll take that back. I was going to say that I don't think that Cassaday is like a amazing designer, but Planetary puts the light of that because he does a lot of amazing designs there. But I think in Planetary, he's doing a lot of designs that are sort of the like purposefully unusual and different, and so they work there. Cassaday trying to design just like ordinary superhero costumes. I mean, I think they're all fine, right? These are none of their worst costumes except for maybe the Beast,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's nothing special, I suppose. I do prefer a brown and tan Wolverine to a blue and yellow Wolverine. So anytime that comes back, I'm like, we can just keep him in the jacket. I think.
I'm totally with you on the brown and tan. I've never really been a
Mhm.
fan of the blue and yellow. Um, Brown and tan all the way. Also, and I'm totally aware that I'm in an extreme minority when I say this, but I don't like the idea of Wolverine wearing the mask. It feels so unnecessary when he's got
Hmm.
such a distinctive hairstyle without the mask.
Right.
And I never like, like the Jim Lee style massive flaps that they have on it. So, but I think
Mhm.
if you're gonna have the mask though, I think I do like how Cassaday toned down the flaps and made it closer to like the original look.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. That was something that I clocked right away. Is, oh, you're going for like it's more of a, because originally those were fairly small, and then was it, I think Gil Kane drew them larger on the cover of Giant Size X-Men #1, and Dave Cockrum was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was originally they were originally very small in his appearance in Hulk, and then Cockrum had drawn them just like they were in Hulk. And then yeah, whoever, I think it might have been Gil Kane, whoever it was, I can't remember who did that cover. Did the big flaps, and then they're like, oh, I can't remember if it was he liked it, or it was just like, oh crap, we have to. It's easier to just
Right.
recolor them,
Right.
reink them instead.
Too late to change it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then it felt like they just kept getting bigger over time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that's like it stops being artistic license and starts being like the Kelly Jones Batman, who I love, by the way. But the Kelly Jones Batman has like 3 foot ears
Hmm.
at some point.
And like shoulder spikes too. I think is that.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Sort of a Jack Skellington.
Mhm. But yeah, I agree with you on Beast costume and on Wolverine's. Cyclops is a pretty good look. I did like how they changed it over time. They lost the belt and they added the X to the chest instead. That was a nice
Mhm.
little tweak they did. Um, Emma's is good too. It's a nice. It's still semi revealing without being gratuitous.
Mhm.
And I mean, Kitty's is just kind of there. It's just the basic. It's just like a basic X-Men uniform that she's been wearing. So I feel like they really got away from giving Kitty her own distinctive look for a little bit too long.
Yeah, it is very much a back to basics thing, and I suppose that's if you're, I think that, um, Whedon's fandom goes back to the Claremont days, and like that's what she would have been wearing very early on. So I imagine that was part of the calculation there.
Also, the weird thing about the story arcs too is the danger thing especially stood out to me because just a few years earlier they did a very similar type of thing except it wasn't the danger room, it was Cerebro that had gained sentience and had become like
I remember that. Yeah, yeah, and he makes those sort of amalgamated X-Men, right?
yeah, the all new all deadly X-Men or something like that it was billed as.
Yeah,
Um Also we get the I don't know, anything you want to say about the gifted story arc, the whole idea of the mutant cure that is introduced here?
yeah. The cure, it's so weird, right? Because that seems like that's supposed to be the high concept hook for the entire, or like it should be the high concept for the entire Whedon run, right? That's a big, like it's directly referring to the mutant, themes and stuff. Um, but then it sort of gets dropped after the first arc, right? Like it's this potentially seismic thing for the entire Marvel universe or whatever, and then it ends up just being like a convenient plot driver thing for like Colossus to come back or whatever. I also just think that like the whole argument of the cure is, it's tricky, right? Because like the mutant metaphor is such like a fragile thing that when you hit it too hard, it exposes that these things are not really the same at all. Because like what we're supposed to think is that like, well, if you could cure being insert marginalized group here, right? You shouldn't do that, right? You should be proud of who you are. You should accept who you are. But like when Wolverine is giving Beast the whole thing about you shouldn't take the cure, he's like, it's not that I'm not proud of being whatever I am. Like he got used to be having the blue fur back in his Avengers days, right? It's like Hank is worried that he's devolving, and so like it's basically like it stops being like an identity or something, and it starts being like I have a degenerative condition, and so like if he can cure that, I think that's an option we should allow him to explore. I mean, like it is. I mean, Wolverine's not wrong that the cure could be weaponized because it absolutely could, right? In a world full of Sentinels, that could absolutely be weaponized, and maybe it is the case that like it would be too existentially dangerous to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, yeah, I just think that like guilt tripping Beast about like, oh, it's bad optics if you take the cure. Um, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Really, I think the problem is the company that markets that. I think marketing it as a cure is the wrong. It's just that's just bad marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you should call that like a treatment or something. When it says cure, you're asking people to take offense to uh your serum or whatever it is.
Yeah, and yeah, the whole cure thing, it feels like strangely enough, and this is going to sound really weird because I understand they're varying different levels of quality, but I feel like
Mhm.
just the cure concept itself was kind of handled a little bit better in X-Men: The Last Stand than it was in this.
Yeah,
Because at
yeah.
least
I like. I
there
mean
it
that
yeah, it
it's
had
it's
it
the main plot driver. Yeah.
exactly. It had this main plot to it. You do see it being weaponized and everything, just like Magneto says. So it
Mhm.
gives this whole thing for them to rally upon. Whereas here, it's not really mentioned at all again after
Yeah.
this arc. I mean, not even in this run. I mean, ever in all the comics, I don't
Right.
remember it ever coming up again.
Yeah. It's amazing how like I said, seismic. This seems like this should be a thing that would be. What does Rogue think about all this? Right. That's what I keep coming back to is like, shouldn't Rogue, if you're introducing this idea, like, and that's something the movie does better too, is that like here's exactly
Mm-hmm.
another person who was like, this is not about identity stuff. This is not about proud to be who I am. This is like I have, functionally a disability is what
Mm-hmm.
Rogue is dealing with here. And so like if there is something that can alleviate that, that's not denying who you are. That's wanting, accommodation, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and also you think about mutants um who have mutations that are damaging in some ways. I remember, there's a Bendis did an Ultimate X-Men arc where there's this one young mutant who emitted this kind of like gas or something like that, and he had inadvertently
Mhm.
like killed his whole town. And it's like
Yeah.
yeah, the mutant metaphor has always been tricky because yeah, you poke it too hard and it does kind of crumble a little bit.
Mm,
My late co-host was a black man, and he always pointed out that one of the things he didn't like about the X-Men was the civil rights metaphor comparison, because he's like, you look at me, you see a black man. You look at
mm.
Cyclops, you see a guy with cool sunglasses. And it's
Right.
it's not exactly the same. I mean, when you
Yeah.
get into, I mean, obviously when you get into, I think it actually works better as a metaphor for LGBTQ, but even then, there are issues with that too, because you know would you want to live next door to a gay couple? Yeah, sure, I'm fine with that. Would I want to live next door to somebody who can, blow my house up by looking too hard at it? No, not so much.
That's
I feel like
that's a very different proposition. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that there is, yeah, I think maybe those are people I think the government should probably keep an eye on. As much as I
That's
understand
just
the
that's just a public health concern, right? At
exactly,
some
yeah.
point of are people do people have uncontrollable portals to the punch dimension coming
Mhm.
out of their face, right? That's
Oh
that's
god.
something we got to keep an eye on.
I hate that explanation for his powers, by the way.
Yeah. That's the more scientific, like I can see. I feel like that was probably like in the, it's probably the 80s or whatever, and people are thinking about like, well, can we come up with a scientific rationale for this? And every scientific rationale comes with like a counterexample of like, what about inertia? Wouldn't he knock him backwards? And so it becomes the most contrived thing in the entire world. And people are still just like, he's got laser beams, right?
Mhm.
No, it's a concussive force blasts are an entirely real thing that actually exists. Yes.
Um so getting into I think that's all we have to say about about Gifted. How about
Mhm.
Dangerous? And we talked a little bit about Danger here and there, but do you have anything else to add about the Dangerous arc?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's neat, that's the idea that like Danger in some sense is a mutant herself and all that stuff. And then like Kitty says to her, you think that you are transcending your programming by, by becoming who you are, but like if you're still trying to kill the X-Men, you really haven't evolved it up, at all, have you? I think that's
Mhm.
interesting. But again, like I don't like doing like the anatomy lesson, like the swamp thing, but for the danger room is like a very fine line between is that clever or stupid. And I think it's on the good side of it, but just barely.
Yeah, I feel like of all of Danger's appearances in comics, I feel like actually this one is maybe her weakest. I
Hmm.
feel like when Mike Carey gets his hands on her, or when Peter David does in X Factor, I feel like she becomes a much more interesting character in those places. Whereas here, it just feels it gave me those sentient Cerebro vibes, and and that wasn't a great story, but even still, I didn't really think this was much better.
Right.
And once we get into the whole Professor X thing, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of over the whole Professor X is a secret bastard thing. It's
Yeah.
to an extent, yeah, I can understand it, but I think it's something that's become overplayed, just like the whole Reed Richards is an evil genius type of thing.
It seems to be some sort of weird like you know I'm mad at my dad kind of thing, right? So so I'm taking that out on Professor Xavier.
Yeah, yeah. It's a weird trend I've noticed with some of these characters where it's like we have to try and look at them in a different light to make it. I don't know. I almost want to say clickbaity in some way. It's like the whole,
Mhm.
the whole Bruce Wayne would do a whole lot more good if Bruce Wayne Batman just beats up poor people. He doesn't actually help the city.
Right.
Like I think we're overstating things just a little bit there.
Yeah, yeah, and with Professor X, people are like, "Oh yeah, he has child soldiers that he trains or whatever." And it's like,
Hmm.
well, you're reading a comic book. Like, what you signed up for this, to
Hmm.
to read a superhero book.
Um. So yeah, I didn't really like that whole idea that, Professor X knew that she was sentient and he used her anyway, and he had controlled her. All of that felt kind of contrived, and also the whole involving him at all in this feels really weird because he's supposed to be here in Genosha with Magneto, and other than one throwaway reference to him, creating some sort of magnetic field or something, there's no Magneto at
Yeah,
all in this arc, which is just it feels like if you're dealing with a robot who's throwing all this metal at you, don't you think you might want to call up your buddy who can do something about that?
Yeah, Xavier even has like a line about like he's not here because this is not his fight. And it's like, well, why isn't
Hmm.
this his fight? It seems like this is exactly his fight. If there
Yeah.
was ever a fight for Magneto, it's the giant metal death machine coming at you.
Right. I was like, you can help him out here a little bit. That whole just them rebuilding Genosha thing was just a very weird era because just nothing ever really came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then from this we get into Torn, which was, I think, in retrospect, I think it might have been my favorite arc of this run. I think it's actually, it was, first off, the tease was amazing at the end of Dangerous when we get that shot of the Hellfire Club, and
Yeah.
that caption, "Nothing lasts forever," and then Shaw says Hellfire does, and then we see
Mm-hmm.
it's him, it's Cassandra Nova, it's Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Very different from the Deadpool movies for anybody who hasn't read these
Yes.
comics. And some mysterious cloaked figure. So I thought that was a really awesome tease right there, and it got me really excited. Now,
Mm-hmm.
at the time, I was disappointed when it turned out that it's not actually the Hellfire Club and it's just all this, Cassandra Nova manipulations thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
still have some issues with that aspect of it. But even still, I think that this arc is probably the strongest of them. What did you think of Torn?
Yeah, I think so too. I I I don't think that the plot, like, if you try to work it out, like, I don't know that I'm entirely sure like what is a psychic illusion and what isn't, and like at what point do people know what or whatever. But I think like the if I step back at it and like I don't know if this arc works, but if when I'm actually reading it, it's just great moment after great moment. I really like enjoyed every little bit in this. I like digging through Cyclops' neuroses. I like obviously like Wolverine becoming that sort of cartoon aristocratic moppet, with
Mm-hmm.
the, the like, oh, a moose, right? I love that, right? That is the humor that this is why we got Whedon to do this art, this title is to bring that kind of humor. I really like the idea of Beast's like psychic trigger or like recovery thing being this ball of yarn,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's like
It's just
coated in all these
tons and tons.
pheromones and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just tons and tons of good ideas in here. I just think like overall, I'm not sure that it holds together. Whatever. I really like the horror aspect to Kitty's like her nightmare or whatever, like the where she has like the axe handle phased into Colossus's head or whatever. One thing that Cassaday does that's great throughout this entire run is that I don't think anybody has ever drawn Kitty's powers to be so interesting. Like he really makes walking through walls look like weird, which is what it should be, right? We're so used to
Mm-hmm.
like in our comic books, like, oh, you just walk through a wall and it's like the little cutaway or whatever. But like it actually looks like that would freak you out to see somebody coming through the wall like that. I think I really like how he sort of like Cassidy's great at taking like he takes the picture, right? If you know what I mean. Like there's like a whole range of motion. He always like picks the exact right moment to like capture, and that's why he doesn't need speed lines or anything, is because he knows like where to position somebody so you can get all the momentum and speed and stuff without having to cheat with like the speed lines or whatever.
No, 100%. Like his covers are amazing throughout this. And especially,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought up that idea of Kitty phasing. That cover from issue number 6, when it's
Yeah.
Colossus and Kitty on the cover, and she's like partly phasing through him.
Mm-hmm.
He makes it look, first off, the first time I saw that cover, I didn't even realize she was phasing at first until I looked
Yeah.
closely. I'm like, oh wow. But yeah, he draws it in this very interesting way, and it really, there's no like glow lines or anything like that. There's no like ghostly appearance or anything. It's just
Right.
literally going right through, and I think he does a good job of showing just like how kind of unsettling that whole
Mm-hmm.
idea is. And I don't think any other artist has ever really drawn it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like when Colossus comes back to life and he sort of just like runs through her and she's so stunned that she just becomes immaterial or whatever. I think that's a great I like the idea of like her emotions being tied to control of the
Mhm.
power. I think that's something that Whedon and Cassaday have fun with in this whole run here.
Well, also speaking of that too, just and I want to go back to the phasing thing because it is one of my
Mhm.
favorite moments in this arc with her phasing. But before we get to that, there's also the cover of this is issue 2 where Emma is covering Cyclops' eyes and is in this optic
Yeah.
glass are starting to shine through her fingers. Again, he does an amazing job with these uh layouts.
Mhm. Yeah, and I like the coloring is really strong on that too. That's Laura Martin, who's one of the great colorists, but I think her work with Cassaday in particular was just really impressive because she has a very bold like color palette, but it's never overpowering. It's never
Hmm.
over rendered. I think that like they both sort of like leave room for each like Cassaday and Martin sort of leave room for each other to bring out the best in what the other one can do.
Hmm. Yeah. And that moment I mentioned here, talking about great moments in this arc, that one where Kitty phases through the floor when her and Peter are
Yeah,
having sex. Like
yeah,
just like that's something that makes sense. And also the next morning when her and Peter walk into the kitchen and Logan just like looks between the two of them and then he's like about
right.
time.
Yeah. There's, I mean, again, this it's just there's so many great individual moments throughout here, and I think that's what I mean, we sometimes are like don't want to praise Joss Whedon or whatever for and everybody has to have their line for that or whatever, right? But
Hmm.
I don't I have to admit that like I think he is a good stylist in terms of finding hooks for characters, finding I mean, as much as he gets, flack for the quippy dialogue, whatever, like it always usually is rooted in some sort of character. Like everybody's little jokes are different little jokes from from everybody else's, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's it's that whole separating the art from the artist thing, and I'm
Yeah.
I will probably never buy anything Whedon ever does again, but I'm
Mhm.
not going to stop enjoying the stuff that he already that I enjoyed before this all came out because I still enjoy it. Like I was doing you've been talking about doing this Buffy rewatch and
Mhm.
I still love the Avengers movie. It's one of my favorite movies. I love Age of Ultron too. I know a lot of people have soured on that movie, but I dig a lot of that movie too.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
Um
I mean, again, like everybody has to have their own, decisions or whatever, and like it can vary from person to person. Like
yeah.
your own, your reaction to this person, person X versus person Y or whatever, and everybody has to do that. But like to be honest, there's so much good work in things that Joss Whedon has done, also by people who aren't Joss Whedon, right? That it's
Mhm.
like, why would I deprive myself of John Cassaday's art in here? Why would I deprive myself of like all the wonderful performances in Buffy? It's hard to write off just because like, yeah, this guy sucks,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Especially that you don't want to discount all the and also I don't want to become a revisionist and say because I've seen people do this when this
Oh
stuff
yeah.
comes out. It's like, oh no, he always sucked. And I'm like,
Mhm.
he was the nerd king for like a good decade
Right.
or more. So come on, we can't just all say that we all secretly hated him the whole time. Come on.
Yeah, I mean that's what made it so hard. I mean there are plenty of times where this comes out and like you know, I won't even name examples, but just like something comes up and like actually I never did read that, so that makes no impact to me. There's no like
Hmm.
moral thing that I struggle with. Whedon is like, yeah, not a diehard fan, but like anything that Whedon would come out with, I would at least consider, engaging with that or reading it or whatever. So that is something like I had to like think about, like, well, how far can I take this? Like you, I don't think that I would, be interested or purchase any new weed material or whatever. But who knows how that's going to go out, in the future or whatever's going to happen. But um, yeah, there's just too many. Even if and like it has impacted my affection for Buffy and these stories to some degree. I mean, I think
Hmm.
I like these things less than I used to. It's hard not to reckon with that, right? But
Yeah, I feel like I noticed more things in Buffy and Angel that I didn't notice before, like about like
yeah,
just like the
definitely.
treatment of women. But honestly, I didn't really notice that in this though. I didn't feel like there was anything that was really kind of standing out in that. I thought both Emma and Kitty are written very strongly here. They're basically the best
Mhm.
characters in the they basically control the whole narrative essentially.
Yeah.
Especially in Torn. Although I will say one of the things that annoyed me about it is I feel like so many people miss something that was so obvious in Morrison's run, which is that Cassandra Nova is is not being held prisoner or anything like that.
Right.
She
She's
became a
Ernst.
student. She's Ernst. Yes, thank
Right.
you. Thank you. And it drives me crazy when like in uh Austin's run, it's like, oh, she broke out of her cell. There was no cell. Morrison
She's
came
walking
right out
around. Yeah,
yeah, and Here Comes Tomorrow, Morrison came right out and said, of course you can still call me Ernst. That was my favorite painter. It's like, it's right there.
Mhm.
It's right there. And then here it's like, oh, well, here's the body of stuff that's locked in this, containment. It's like, no, no, none of that happened.
Yeah, I mean, like it's funny because like Morrison has his reputation for being difficult or obscure or whatever, but like a lot of times it's just I think people get in their heads about that about
Mhm.
oh Morrison's going to be tricky, but it's like that yeah that was made very it could almost not be more explicit unless you actually just saw like a flashback of like her turning into Ernst or something, right? It
Yeah.
was yeah.
Especially because Ernst never shows up after this. So I feel like they knew on some level and they just decided to
Yeah.
ignore it.
Mhm.
But I do love too when Cyclops comes back here at the end and he's wearing speaking of the Morrison era, he's back to wearing the X jacket and
Mhm.
he's using the gun here and he doesn't have it because his powers have been blocked. I thought that was a really
Yeah.
cool. I thought this was a really badass moment for Cyclops in this last part of the arc.
Oh yeah. I it was great because when he shows up and he doesn't have the powers and he's shooting guns and he's being pretty casual about the whole thing. It is a genuine moment of like has he lost it, right? Is I mean
Mm,
I don't know what Joss Whedon has the keys to do. Maybe he's gonna make Cyclops a villain now, or have him break down completely or something. So I was along for the ride of like, yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen next with this guy.
Especially here in this, I'm looking at this page right now when Peter wakes up and he's like Scott, and Scott's just like calmly shooting Shaw while
Right.
looking away and smiling. He's like, "You would not believe the day I'm having," and he's like, "You're shooting people." He's like, "No, I'm an X-Man. I don't shoot people." He's like, and he just keeps shooting them nuts. I'm like, "Are you okay,
Yeah.
dude?"
Yeah. Really, really good stuff. Yeah.
Although I do question the decision for Beast to take time out of this whole psychic invasion to put on a three-piece suit and a bow tie.
I mean the cat
I,
has style, I think.
I get what he was trying to go for with the visuals there, but it also feels like maybe you could have sold that with just him putting on his glasses or or combing back
Right.
his hair. It didn't have to go full on three-piece suit and bow tie. And so then we get to the final arc, Unstoppable, which yeah, this was definitely my least favorite. I mean, as much of a bang as this whole run started off with, I feel like it really kind of fizzled out when we got to this part here.
Mhm. Yeah, it becomes again it's all the politics of the break world I'm not really invested in. It's one of those things where it's like on Star Trek, when they like go to a planet and it's like I don't know what the boundaries of this world are. It seems like there's like one town in this entire planet, and like all those stuff is just happening somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and and again, like the whole like the idea of this whole destiny mutant thing, and like that's the motivation behind the cure. Even by the standards of superhero comic books, which I love, but we give them a lot of leeway for like logic and stuff. The
Mm-hmm.
whole idea that like a mutant would be prophesied to destroy the break world. Therefore, we have to come up with a cure for mutants. Therefore, we have to bring somebody back, but the person that we brought back is the one who's going to be. Why did you bring? I mean, I guess you couldn't have known, but like, why did you bring Colossus back for that? It's there's just too many. There's too many weird little things that I don't know how they fit together.
No, I had the same thing. Like I could not I still can't wrap my head around first off, why do you have to bring a mutant back from the dead to make this cure to test it on? Like, why
Right.
can't you just there are a lot of mutants out there who aren't dead. I mean, that just feels
Right.
like this completely contrived way because Whedon's like, I like Colossus. I want Colossus to be alive again. And
Mhm.
that's really all it feels like. But it like the cure thing, it like I said, like we said, it's dropped after that first arc, and there doesn't seem to be any connection between specifically Colossus needing to be the one who and there's a way to do it because Colossus had to inject himself with the guys, the way he died, it was both it was a wonderfully written issue. It was very emotional. It was, I don't say that often about Scott Lobdell's writing, but that was a really well written issue. At the same
Mhm.
time, the logic behind how that legacy virus cure doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense.
No,
I don't
no.
understand why it has to be injected into a mutant and then it kills them and then the cure gets magically no idea how that works. Um but here but you could have tied that into this, like, because he had been infected with the legacy virus cure. That's like the right combination of antibodies or whatever that we need to make a mutant cure or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
That would have made sense, but none of that is ever touched on here. So it just feels like when it's one of those things, when you think about it, you're like, why did it have to be Colossus? Why do we have to resurrect him to build this cure? Why can't we have just gone with any random mutant around out there?
Yeah, and like they even make the point of like saying, Kitty says like, "Oh, we had your ashes or whatever, and I scattered them or whatever." And I was like, "So not only did you steal Colossus's body to bring it back to life, but you also like switched remains and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of finicky work for this Ord guy to be doing behind the scenes."
Yeah, and it happened a while ago too, so it's not like this is something that just happened in the in the previous year.
Yeah.
This is going back like 2 or 3 years at this point.
Mhm.
Um, Also here we have the now there's some great moments in this. Like I like when the peak blows up and you see like the Wolverines team, they're struggling in there as like their ship is flying all out of control and everything.
Mhm.
And but then you cut over to Scott and Emma's team, and Emma's created this psychic illusion where they're just sitting there having tea all calmly, so they don't have to
Right.
worry about it.
Yeah. Again, like, individual moments in here are really wonderful. I really love the Leviathan fake out. How you see that from two different angles and stuff. And I don't know that I could totally follow it, but also like, it's like the Ocean's 11 thing where like, I don't care if I can really follow how it, if I can really like draw a map of like how the plot works. I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this makes enough sense that I'm like, yep, you had a plan all along. Good job. Yeah, I love that kind of reversal.
Yeah. Also, the whole idea of them, how Brand had costumes for them all, except she still didn't have one for Cyclops. Like, he's still wearing the X
Yeah.
jacket. And they apparently had a spare costume for Kitty because then Armor can wear it.
Right.
Which I did like the line though about Ms. Pride's arms are too long.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it you had mentioned. A lot of this, there's in a lot of ways, part of this story reminds me of Batman Hush in that we're kind of getting some. This is kind of like a greatest hits compilation. It feels like a
Yeah.
cover band type of thing.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's like, I mean, Joss Whedon, he's been very open about how influential X-Men and the Claremont run in particular was to, Buffy and stuff. And so I do see like this is my chance, right? I have the biggest possible spotlight, and now I can do anything I want. It's perhaps natural to want to do like the old favorites or whatever. And I'm sure that's what he was hired to do, right? Because like it
Mm-hmm.
was put him back in the costumes, have him do superhero stuff, all that kind of thing. So like that is the assignment, I suppose. But yeah,
Yeah, there's some, and it's not like it's bad, like, but there's some fun things he does in it because of that, like the obviously we get the fastball special, right, which is great to
hmm
see for the first time in
yep,
years. We get the whole Wolverine mentoring a young teenage girl mutant type of thing with him and Armor. In some funny effects, like when she's speaking Japanese and she's like trying to insult him in Japanese, and he responds back
right.
in Japanese.
Yeah, that's again, that's a really well observed, really clever, and like not at all artificial joke to make, right? So like Whedon is really like thinking about these characters and how they fit together and stuff. But yeah, yeah, I agree with you that like the overall plot stuff and how it works, even, yeah, like I said, even by superhero standards, where we want to give, we'll just pretend that like Batman could be have a secret identity at all, like in the modern world, right? We
Hmm.
suspend our disbelief. I don't think I can suspend my disbelief for most of the plot mechanics of this arc in
No,
particular.
no, most of this arc doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense, like we've been saying, but it does have some great moments, like when Cyclops reveals the truth behind Leviathan and it's all been a big fake out, and then Krun's like screaming in his face, like he's like, what? He's like, oh, lies. This is the great human weapon. He's like, what other lies have you told? And Scott just smiles, and then we get this beautiful two double page spreads of Cyclops
Yeah.
just unwailing with his optic blast on Krun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, I mean, the man knows how to put together a really like dramatic, like hell yeah moment, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's an arc that's full of like me pumping my fist. It's
Yeah.
only afterwards that I'm like, well, I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah. Um, well, that's a good time to talk about the when we get to the ending here and the whole. This is where I feel like Whedon's own instincts kind of take in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, oh well, it's the end of the story arc. We have to have some kind of sacrifice. So in this
Right.
case, it's like I feel like they probably told him like, don't kill Kitty. So instead, he's like, all right, well, she's just phased, stuck in this giant bullet for however long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I mean, that is like Whedon's whole thing, right? Is that like, I mean, he's also really good at writing the set, the big, important, meaningful sacrifice, right? So I suppose you do want to let him do that, but even you know, it's hard to imagine like there isn't like 8 different solutions that you could do just like overnight to to get Kitty back, like with in the Marvel universe, right?
Hmm.
Someone's got to have like the Silver Surfer's line or something. It's one of those things of like like of all the dangerous things that you have survived, this seems like this should be like maybe 2 or 3 issues top to crack. You know?
Yeah. Well, especially because when they do bring Kitty back, it's like Magneto does it in one issue. He just meditates for a long
Right.
time, and then he's able to do it. So it did feel like there was some contrivance there and it felt like,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, we have to have some sort of dramatic button to end this all on.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's that's Whedon falling back on a bag of tricks that he knows how to do and he does it well. But I think I certainly felt like reading this, like when she had that speech to Colossus earlier about like how you have to hold on to every moment or whatever. It's like, well, obviously this is what Joss Whedon writes a character saying right before they have to sacrifice themselves. So
mhm.
I know how this is going to end.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know, any final thoughts about this run overall, or kind of like its lasting impact?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's again, like I've been saying, like full of individual, really awesome moments, some all timers. Really, I think in the X-Men, canon or whatever. Um, I don't know that it's had a whole lot of impact. I mean, like, does the Cure even exist or at some point?
That's what I was wondering about. I feel like because this kind of all coincides because this happens very close to. I'm not sure exactly when House of M happens. I think it happens technically after this arc. I don't know exactly,
Hmm.
but no, I think it happens before because Spider-Man, when all the heroes get together, Spider-Man talks about how we don't often get together unless it's all without being all Civil War-y, and I'm just like, wait, so, and this is why I had a problem trying to figure this out. Wait, so if this takes place after Civil War, then shouldn't half the people in here be under arrest right now?
Yeah, I mean that was this whole like giving Whedon and Cassaday their own title was to like have to connect up with everything else, right? And that was sort of that whole again like that Bill Jamis, Joe Quesada ethos of like these should all stand alone and you shouldn't have to have a degree in comicology to be able to follow these things, but like having everybody show up at the end and then like having to awkwardly figure out where they are in continuity. That
Mhm.
also just seems like Joss Whedon being like, well, I kind of want to write Spider-Man. Like before I take off, can I just write a Fantastic Four scene and a Spider-Man scene and okay,
I
thanks, bye.
really,
Right?
I really feel like he wanted to write Spider-Man because
Yeah.
he does a really good job capturing Spidey's voice. I felt,
I
and
do I do wonder what that would look like, a Whedon. Not that I want to see at this point, right? But like
yeah,
what a Whedon Spider-Man would have looked like, I
I
guess.
was thinking the exact same thing as I was reading. Like, yeah, I kind of want to see it, but at the same time, oh, with his baggage, I'm
Yeah.
not so sure now.
Yeah, I'll pass, but what could have been, right?
maybe there's an alternate, maybe there's some world in the multiverse where Whedon's not a sex pest, and then we can get the Whedon Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I think like the biggest lasting impact is probably the work he did with Cyclops and also Colossus coming back to life. I feel like those are kind of the big things that have been taken away. Also, this was really, and it's been we're past it now, not undone, but we're past it now. But the Scott Emma relationship, like it was, we only got the start of it at Morrison's run, but I think Whedon really established the template for Scott and Emma, and it's a template that
Yeah.
lasted a good long time. Like that's a good like decade or so, right? Or decade plus, maybe even.
Yeah, for all that, like a lot of Morrison stuff immediately got reversed, like the next month, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that the Scott and Emma thing was the one thing that they were like, okay, we want to deal with this. And I wonder if Whedon didn't or hadn't wanted to do that, if they would have reversed that sooner. I think maybe that seemed like something that would be, it seems like the sort of thing that Whedon would think is a fun idea, just because like, oh, there's a lot of tension and conflict here that will be fun
Yeah,
to write.
and he does it to great effect. Like the scene when we first see Wolverine, and he goes to when Scott and Emma are in bed, and he's like, "Which stage
Mhm.
of grieving is this?" and they start fighting.
Yeah.
um, and also then the Wolverine keep picking fights with everybody was just kind of a treat. And then Kitty's like, she's like, are you to pick a fight with everybody in the team? Are you gonna fight with me next? And he's like, no, you go all ninja on me. I can't take that. But yeah, fun run for the most part. Kind of fizzled
Mhm.
out, and the character stuff is really, I think, what's the strongest point of this.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I do think that Whedon is a decent plotter, like on on Buffy, on other things that he's done. I just think like here it's, I guess, just, yeah, maybe it is that like sort of being beholden to the greatest hits thing, that it's just sort of, it's playing through things that seem a little perfunctory. Yeah, I don't know that this is a run that I would return to all the time. I mean, I hadn't read it for quite a while before revisiting it. Um, but yeah, I think I'll definitely dig this out of the boxes again one day.
Yeah, it's not one that's completely that I completely write off. It's a lot of fun. It's got some great moments in it, like we've talked about. But I mean, more than anything else, I think what really sells this is just it looks fucking gorgeous. Like Cassaday's
Yeah,
art, it's just
yeah, can't say enough.
amazing. Yeah.
Especially that you mentioned the fastball special, right? The panel that here, that 2-page spread that he draws of Colossus throwing Wolverine, like the fastball special has always been one of those things that you just sort of like accept as like a cartoon physics thing. But that actually looks like, here's what it would look like to throw a man who's 5'3" like through the air, and like the wind whipping at his face and stuff. There's a little curl of smoke that you can see like in the background with
Mhm.
him like to keep it motion. It's just Cassaday, man. Like what a generational talent.
I
I
know.
mean,
Yeah.
if if somebody doesn't want to read this for Joss Whedon, like totally understand. But like maybe look at it, just sort of
Yeah.
like just look at the drawings, right? It's beautiful. I do sort of, part of that, like the Joss Whedon like dialogue heavy stuff, I sometimes wish that he had more exciting visual things to draw, because sometimes
Mhm.
it's just like looking at somebody frowning at Agent Brand, and then they're frowning at Agent Brand, and then somebody else is frowning at Agent Brand, as opposed to like all the really cool like visual stuff that like we know from like Planetary and other things, that like Cassaday can draw pretty much anything that you ask him to draw,
Yeah.
and in a way that you wouldn't have expected him to do it, right? So it's almost a shame that there's not more weird stuff going on in this arc, but
Well, yeah, and to your point, I kind of wish that, and I don't know if maybe it was editorial or if it was Whedon's own choice, but it feels like maybe he was my assumption is maybe they didn't want him to go too much into the greatest hits territory, which is why we only get new villains here and we don't get like
mhm.
any of the old standbys. But I wish like that again, that double page spread of the Sentinel simulation when they're attacking the orientation, another beautiful
Yeah.
shot. And I kind of wish we'd been able to see like Cassaday drawing like the X-Men versus Magneto or Apocalypse or whoever. Like I think it would have been really
Mhm.
cool to see him handle and see his take on some of those classic villains too.
Yeah. I do like Danger's design. I think that's a really neat. That has all like the little like filigrees that I
Mhm.
associate with Cassaday from Planetary. You know, that's like the most Cassaday design in this thing. So I enjoy her design a lot. But
And also, I do like too that he brought back the skull cap for Cyclops, because he'd been without
Mhm.
it since like the 80s, because
Yeah,
he
like
even in like
right.
the end of X Factor he abandoned it. And
Mhm.
and it's funny looking back, I'm just like, oh, the skull cap seems kind of old fashioned now. And then when I looked at it here, I'm just like, these visuals of like just like, you know, this guy who's almost like completely in black except for this red line. I'm like, oh, that's actually really striking.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I had never thought about it that way because I'd always liked, you know, I'd liked it both ways. You know, I like the especially that X Factor costume that had like the big white stripe down the middle. I
Hmm.
really liked that one. But you know, I mean, I really liked the exposed hair with like the visor that Frank Quitely drew on him, where it's almost just sort of like a pair of shades or something, like
Hmm.
Geordie LaForge's visor or something, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, I do. I mean, if it was like let's get these guys back in superhero costumes, um, yeah, I think it makes sense to go for like the most superhero-y aesthetic that you can.
absolutely. Well, that was a fun conversation, and you know, I really enjoyed
Yeah,
going back and digging into this again. And yeah, I feel like it's kind of what I was talking earlier with like Jaws and Back to the Future. I kind of had like the same sense of this too. Like it's one of those runs that since I last read it, my opinion has kind of diminished a little bit of it. And I'm just like, hey, it was all right. And then I'm rereading. I'm like, oh, the highs are pretty high in this,
yeah,
and
yeah, definitely.
the lows aren't that low, but it does drag it down a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah, I think a mixed bag, but an enjoyable mixed bag.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. All right, Justin. So why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Yep. Our podcasts, me and Jim Cannon, my co-host, we co-host the Iron Age of Comics. You can find us, you know, any of your podcasting apps that you listen to. We're there. We're not on YouTube, unfortunately. I just can't figure that out. I will never figure that out. Also, you don't really want there to be a video component to when Jim and I do the show because we do it late. we're, we're just barely keeping it together. But yeah, so yeah, basically anywhere that you want to find podcasts, Iron Age of Comics, you'll find us. There's a Patreon. We got like a link tree, all that stuff. On social media, the best place to get in touch with us is at Iron Age of Comics on Blue Sky. I checked the other things, but Blue Sky is sort of where home is for us.
Okay, great. We'll have links to that stuff in the show notes, so please check that out. As for us, superherocinephiles.com is the website. We are Super Cinema Pod on Instagram and Threads, and superherocinephiles.com on Blue Sky, which is where I spend most of the time. So you can check us out there. And that does it for this episode. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late, great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate it if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.